Alright guys, so with Saturday being the final preseason game, I wanted to go and give my predictions on who's going to be making the roster and who won't be making the roster. Now keep in mind that the roster currently sits at 88 players. 2 of them are on IR at this moment in time, so it is technically 90 players, but right now we have 88 players. Now the IR players do not count against our roster, we just simply didn't pick up 2 more players. So that's pretty much that, but with that being said, today we're cutting down from 88 to 53-man roster. So let's start off with the quarterbacks. So green means they're currently on the team. Once I turn this to red, that means they are going to be booted off the team. So Joe Burrow, Trevor Siemian, Jake Browning, and Reed Sinnett. First quarterback gone is most likely going to be Reed Sinnett, unless Sinnett has a fantastic game this upcoming week. Even then, I don't think he's going to make the roster. Now, I do truly believe that the Bengals will keep 2 quarterbacks, not 3. One of them will be put toward the practice squad, and probably, in case something happens, could be brought up to the active roster. I honestly think the guy who will be cut is going to be Trevor Siemian. So I think going into the season, we'll have Joe Burrow and Jake Browning, which is going to be awesome because Jake Browning last year did really good in the preseason. This year did really good in the preseason. But last year, because of Brandon Allen, he was not the backup quarterback. So now he gets a chance to be the backup quarterback. Now, going into the season, of course, running back-wise, we're most likely going to see both of these guys cut. I don't think we're going to go into the season with either Jacob Sayers or Calvin Tyler Jr. These were guys that they brought in, during the training camp and preseason to see how they could play, on special teams and have more bodies on the roster. But I could fully see us go into the season with 4 running backs on the roster. First off, Chris Evans has been showing off so much in training camp, practice, and preseason so far. He looks good, right? And the Bengals like him. So I don't see him being cut. Travion Williams, yes, he's been dealing with an ankle injury the last couple of weeks, and that might, hinder his value. But again, he's another player the Bengals really like, and I think they could have a lot of success on special teams with him. So if they don't need to cut him, they're not going to cut him. Now, at the receiver position, this is where we're going to start making cuts very quickly. And starting off right away, I do truly believe here that the only receivers that will remain on this roster, because first off, Cedric Jackson could technically remain on this roster. There is a possibility that this could happen. But with that being said, I kind of highly doubt it at this moment in time, just because of the other receivers they have on here. Now, me personally, I'm kind of on the fence about Morgan Stanley. So I do believe 6 receivers. They could keep 7 and keep Morgan Stanley. The reason why I say that is because they really like the guy. He is one of those guys where it's like, he's not really that great, but he's a consistent player on special teams and a consistent player the Bengals really do like. So I'm going to keep him for now. If we have to cut him in the end, he will be the first guy that ends up going, if we have to after we do all the other cuts. But with that being said, I think we will keep either 6 or 7 receivers, and that's kind of where that will stay. Now for the tight end position, Irv Smith obviously makes the roster. I think that Tanner Hudson, even though I talked about him today in the video, I think he does not make the final roster here. And that's actually not the red I wanted there. That red looked really bad. I don't think Christian Chahan makes the roster either, or Nick Bowers. And I do not think, out of these 3 options, that Devin makes the roster. I think he will be cut here. And we're going to the season with Irv Smith, Drew Sample, and Mitchell Wilcox. For left tackle position, I possibly could see all 3 of these guys making the roster. Now, Jackson Carman will be a swing tackle, so he'll be a left and a right tackle at the end. But Devonta Smith has been playing so good in training camp. And he's one of those guys that a lot of the, reporters and media have talked about him, because he's been pretty solid. So we're going to see if we have to cut him in the end here, but we might keep him on the roster. Now, Ben Brown, I think, is going to be a guy who ends up getting cut here. I don't think he makes the final roster. And same thing here with Nate Gilliam. Now, I'm expecting them to keep at least one backup center. So, Trey Hill, who's actually been trying out a lot of different positions during training camp and preseason, should make the active roster in the end here. Going down the list here, Jackson Kirkland, I think, does make the roster. But a player I do not think makes the roster here is actually Cody Ford. He has been looking pretty bad at the right tackle position. He's been pretty solid around the offensive line, but not the right tackle position. And I don't think he's going to end up making the cut here, especially with all the other offensive linemen we're going to be keeping. Now, after going through a whole entire offense there, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive line, we are now down to 72 players. That means we just cut off 16 players from this roster. We got to get down to 53 man, and there's a lot on defense, so I'm not really that surprised. By the way, that's the number right there you can see. This updates every time we cut somebody. So, for example, if we cut, good example here, Carney, right, and we change that to a 0, that changes to a 71. So, every player we cut, this updates. So, yeah. Now, Carney is a player that he's looked really good in preseason. But I think he's a really good example of a player who simply, it's not the right position. It's not the right team for him. And what I mean by that is we have so many good players on this defensive line. Edge rushers, inside guys, 3 technique guys. That Carney, yes, he made that crazy great play against the Falcons last week. And I believe I actually do have a stat I posted on my community tab. I want to say yesterday. Let me see if I can bring this up real fast. I said, shout out to... Oh, yeah. So, no, this was on Zach Carter, not Carney. But so far, Zach Carter has actually been 17.2% win rate in pass rushing department, which is actually amazing. But again, like I said, Carney made that one big play. But I think on any other team, it's very possible that, yes, he just makes the roster because of that one play. That's not going to be for us. Jeff Gunner's another guy that I'm kind of on the fence about. He's looked really good in training camp preseason so far. But we're going to come back to him if we have to. Terrell Basham, I do not think makes the roster. He's been hurt as of, all training camp so far and preseason. And I don't think he goes out there and does make the roster in the end here. Now, for a defensive line or defensive tackle, this is when we're going to start really cutting down a lot of players. And I do believe Zach Carter does make the roster in the end here, but I'm not going to say the same about these two guys right here. Now, for the linebacking core, and again, keep in mind, just because we're going through and cutting these players, guys, does not mean that, if we miss a player or go past a player, we could come back and cut that player if we need to at the end. We're just going through like our simple cuts right now, and then we'll go back and make the harder cuts as we go through it. But I do have Jalen Moody and Tyler Murray going off this roster. For the secondary position, I do believe it's going to be Marvell Tell, who I know right now is recovering from, some injuries. And I think it's also going to be Jalen Davis. I'm going to have him get cut too. Which 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6 cornerbacks going into the season makes sense. Now, for the secondary safety-wise, I'm going to be cutting... Michael Thomas is a guy I don't want to cut on here, especially because he's really good on special teams. He had a lot of veteran experience on this roster, but I think they're not going to bring him back. And I don't think they're going to continue throughout the season with him. It's very possible he ends up just being a guy that, goes on, like, special teams. On the practice squad, and then they kind of monitor him, but I don't think they're going to go with him into the season. Now, the last couple guys we have here is going to be the punters. Brad Robbins and Drew Chrisman. Now, right now, we are sitting at 61 men on this roster, so we have to cut down 8 more players. And I don't see the reason why we keep Drew Chrisman. Brad Robbins has looked very capable and very good throughout the preseason and training camp. Obviously, Chrisman has dealt with a lot of, the whole thing with the hospital problems and stuff like that. But I think that, they drafted Brad Robbins to be the replacement. And I think he has shown us in every way possible he is the guy we want. So I do believe, again, I know this is going to be a tough one, Chrisman gets cut. And this is just mainly because we got to cut down this roster, guys. I know it sucks, but it is what it is. All right. So now going back up, we now have to cut 7 more players. So 7 more hopes and dreams are cut from this roster. And if I go back up to the very top here, this is where I'm going to probably do our first guy, and that's going to be Morgan Stanley. I know I talked about before how they like him, and he could return for that reason, but I think if they have to cut down this roster, it's going to start at that position, and some of those positions that, might be kind of on the edge. Another player that they might cut down for this roster here is going to be left tackle, and I'm going to go ahead and cut down on Hakeem. Hakeem obviously was the guy last year in the playoffs who got, let Chris Jones go right through him and get to Joe Burrow, and it ended our AFC Championship game. So I could possibly see that ends up being, his final time with the Cincinnati Bengals. But going down the list here, I don't really want to cut Jackson Kirkland. He hasn't looked too good, by the way, Jackson Kirkland in training and preseason so far. He's actually looked pretty bad. But again, like I said, the potential there, the talent is there, and I think he's going to, potentially make the roster based on that. Next guy I'm going to cut is Jeff Gunner. Again, another player I'd rather not cut, but I think that if we have to cut down this roster, he's just a guy that is going to be like a casualty to this roster. And it is what it is. It sucks, but it is what it is. All right, so next player is going to be Keon. I did not mean to... Okay, did not mean to do that. Let's do that red here, and let's make this color that gray color. I had it before. There we go. All right, so yes, Keandre Jones is going to be the next player cut. I am also going to be cutting... I like Marcus Bailey. I think I'm going to go ahead and put out here my man's Joe Bashie, which, again, like I said, another player I don't want to cut. All right, 2 cuts left. This is why it's hard doing this, guys, because there's so many players you look at and you're like, I love that guy. He's a great player. He's a great guy. And then you're like, but he has to go. Someone has to go, okay? Not everyone can stay on this roster. Now we get the tough ones. I really like Raymond Johnson, and he's looked so good in the preseason. I don't want to cut him. I might cut Jay here. But Jay's looked so good, too. And Zach Carter has led it with the pass rush. So it's like, I don't want to cut Jay. Oh, my gosh. There's so many players, guys, I don't want to cut. Shaka Haywood is that undrafted guy, who really has shown off and been amazing. Okay, we're just going to have to bite the bullet here, guys. I'm going to go with Raymond Johnson. Because if it comes to, comes to it, it comes to it. And we have one more player we have to cut. I might cut... I'm going to cut Jay. And I hate to do that because he's looked good, but... Oh, wait, I did Zach Carter by accident. What? Rip the dream. Zach Carter is not going to get cut. But I am going to be cutting Jay. But like I said, I don't want to do this. But at the same time, though, we got to get down to 53-man roster. And it is what it is. So here's our final roster. Quarterbacks, Joe Burrow and Jake Browning. Running backs, Joe Mixon, Trevion Williams, Chase Brown, and Chris Evans. Wide receivers, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Trenton Irwin, and Charlie Jones, and Yoshi. Tight ends, Irv Smith, Drew Sample, and Mitchell Wilcox. Left tackles, Orlando Brown and Donta Smith. Left guard, Cordell Volson and Max. Center is Teddy K and Trey Hill. Right guard is Kappa and Jackson Kirkland. Right tackle is Jonah, Carmen, and Collins. Left end is Sam Hubbard, Miles Murphy, Cam Sample. Right end is Trey Hendrickson, Joseph Asai. Defensive tackle is DJ Reader, BJ Hill, Josh, and Zach Carter. Linebacker, Jermaine Pratt, Logan Wilson, Marcus Bailey, and Shaka Haywood. Corners are Cheeto, Cam Taylor-Britt, Mike Hilton, Sidney Jones, DJ Turner, and Poison Ivy. Safety is Dax Hill, Nick Scott, Tyson Anderson, Jordan Battle. And then special teams is Brad Robbins, Evan McPherson, and Cal. Those are my cuts down, my final predictions for the 53-man roster before this Saturday game versus the Commanders. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.